Firstly, props to JP, and it's a shame we couldn't meet here, but thanks for inviting UN-Habitat to this session. Of course, very grateful to the Association for the Rights of Children in Southeast Asia and Kadame for coordinating the event with partners here. And it was so my role here is to offer some reflection. I sit within the regional office for Asia and the Pacific here with UN-Habitat, and we've been coordinating the SDG 11 review process as well as the goal profile here at the Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development. So, firstly, I'm thrilled to see the analysis and the content that's clearly visible through the work that's being led, of course, both by CSC and Bahai Tulian, I think, Catherine. I also think I picked up a bit of maybe an Aussie accent there as well, and also from Montefort Social Institute as well. So I think in the spaces that we are sitting here at the Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, it certainly is valuable to bring to the core some of the indicators that are relevant. I think what's valuable to perhaps consider in this space around children, let's say at the edge, and that are most vulnerable is beyond just the housing issues. I think that'd be important to look into. Of course, the issues around SDG 6 are also being assessed at the moment in this particular round. And as we know, during COVID, waste and sanitation programs, particularly for preventative measures, was very challenging for those that are informal settlements. We visited and supported the setup of water points at transit stations. We were looking at how to provide and support for COVID-19 measures within homeless shelters, and it was virtually impossible because there was no space. There was no segregation. In fact, access to clean water was a challenge before COVID. So going into COVID, sanitation just became more difficult. So I think these issues are quite pertinent, and in many ways they provide entry points to have this other discussion around housing and land tenure, which can often be a bit more contentious. So coming in from that access to services angle can often be very valuable in having the discussion with municipality or other partners as you're exploring that further as well. So commend, of course, the strong data content, which is to convey the severity of the issues. We heard there from MSI about the 15 million living in threat of evictions, displacement, 4 million homeless, and that's just in India, right? So in the region, we know there's 600 million slum dwellers across both Southeast and South Asia. And at the same time, at a global level, about 1.6 billion people that still live within conditions of inadequate housing. So it's a challenge, and it has been a persistent challenge. I don't think that it will be resolved anytime soon. Interestingly, we led the SDG 11 goal profile, which will be presented in the roundtable tomorrow for those that are here in Bangkok and joining in for that session. And the suggestion, which I have to admit, at a personal level, I would dispute, is that the suggestion is that we will reach our target in terms of urban slum populations by 2030, right? Now, the question that I would pose there to the participants in our forum here today is what is our definition then of a slum population, which obviously changes. And if the definition changes, then it's very easy for government to get away and suggest that they're meeting their needs, right? And secondly, in what areas? Because inevitably, as we have development, there will always be pockets of informality, and there will be communities that will be potentially left behind. And those that are coming into new cities and areas, migrants and perhaps stateless persons that are vying for economic livelihood and education opportunities will often be at the fringes as well. So, so as I said, my personal view is I question that, and I encourage you, if you are joining for the roundtable tomorrow from the Urban Poor Consortium and coalition constituencies, to raise these points, right? Because the suggestion right now in terms of statistics is that we'll meet those targets by 2030, and they don't take into account that population may potentially grow by 2030, which is another dimension that we need to consider as well. I think, Catherine, you already highlighted very well around the issues, the cascading impacts that link to those particularly children being at risk of being victims themselves of physical and sexual harassment. And of course, it's a perpetual cycle as well, right? So if you're, this comes to the discussion about the household family unit. So the values that you have growing up, if you have that family and social network that can support you, but if you inherently grow up in a society where you are victimized, that you are harassed and abused, when you grow up, then you carry some of those emotional um, discrimination and concerns with you, that can lead to a perpetual cycle and be very hard to break out of, as well. So I think what we need to be able to strive to do in this context, when we're considering particularly the needs of children, is look at what we can, I would suggest, consider as pathways to prosperity that allow for the children that are in these circumstances to obtain and develop opportunities for sustained education and support to attend school, and not then be spending their times in precarious potential family support occupations or other hazardous risk taking endeavors as well. So I think these are some things that we need to take into account when we consider these areas well. I was really fascinated, I have to say, by some of what you were sharing there, Catherine, as well as I guess around the permits, guards, and fences. And I think you referred to as permits, guards, and fences, I think, Catherine, and I guess around city beautification, sports events, and environment conservation, I noted down. So it's interesting because so often municipalities, and we see these as positive development, right? We think, this is going to bring economic growth and prosperity to the city. We're seeing greenification of cities, but it can be, as you said, camouflaged and leading to this eviction and they may say, oh look, you're only temporarily out for this period of time, but then, as you said, the fences go up and then the land is then taken away, and it's very hard to kind of retrieve that back again. So I think, again, this is something to consider, and I think we need to reflect upon it more within the discussion on SDG 11 here at APFSD, but also in New York in July at HUPF, and thinking about what we consider as development now, but then what would be the impacts on which communities and in what way, right? So I think this is a really valuable point that you raised around how we address permits and bylaws and the regulatory mechanisms that guard our social protection and welfare systems as well. So really interesting points there. I just wanted to share. I also noted, just to share, of course, this year is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We heard many human rights instruments, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, and other, the Article 27 under the CRC. So, use this year as a platform to campaign as part of the urban poor constituency for these issues around access to services. And when I've discussed with colleagues from UNICEF on issues around provision of services, particularly around children, it was clearly the most evident area that we could move upon. And also in many respects, areas that donors and member states can see quite visibly where the impacts are. I think my closing is very much related to that as well, in what I want to share as a quick reflection, in that what we need to be able to convey in forums, particularly these heavily policy oriented and, let's face it, top down, hierarchical processes, is we need to bring the message from the bottom up in terms of what the reality of the impacts are, and in particular what the actual cost is to productivity, right? I mean, when we have these children that are impacted in the ways that are, whether it's due to malnutrition, inadequate housing, it's a lost generation of productivity. It's lives that are irreversibly harmed and have very little opportunity to really grow and reach that potential that could support growth and development within the country, and as a byproduct of that, unfortunately, does often lead to issues of social ills and potential crime, as was shared earlier as well. So I think what we need to be able to convey is, what is the potential for growth if we had imagined, right, 1 million young people that now were fully engaged, educated, informed, that knew what rights they had, and actively contributed to the development of the nation, right? So to be able to show that is something that may help incentivize and help the municipalities see this as rather than a burden they have to manage, but an opportunity that they can cultivate and help bring into the fore. So the more we can do that, I think the more that the message will carry across. And as UN Habitat in our endeavor, we continue to support the work of the urban poor and informal communities. And we look forward to working closely with the constituents here for our forums that will be coming up, including the Asia Pacific Urban Forum in October in Korea, as well as our World Urban Forum in Egypt, in Cairo in January. So looking forward to seeing you there. And thank you once again for the opportunity to contribute today. Many thanks. Back to you, JP.